This is All Clear, Firefighter Health and Wellness, where we help you light your fire within. I'm Travis. Thank you for joining us on All Clear. Today we got another special guest. We've got Ryan McKay, food extraordinaire, I think, or chef extraordinaire. I think we're going to go with that. But if you've got another title, go with it. But we just wanted to reach out to you today. Ryan, good to talk to you. Glad to get you on the show. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, who you are, where you're at, where you're in the fire service, how long you've been doing it, all that good, pertinent stuff.
Well, Travis, first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. It's truly an honor to be on your podcast. It's always great to meet somebody who has the passion for health and wellness like we both do. Really quickly, Ryan McKay, I'm actually a battalion chief with Cobb County Fire and Emergency Services just outside of the city of Atlanta. The Braves are our home. It's in my first in territory. I've been in the fire service for roughly 20 years. I spent about 2.5 years out with CAL FIRE, where I was born and raised, and about 18 here in Georgia. And boy, I'm a happy father of 2. I'm married for 25 years to a beautiful wife, and I love to talk about food, anything and everything you can possibly imagine. I've done it, been there, seen it, love to talk about it.
I like to talk about food and eat food, so I think I'm a semi-expert on this myself, not the cooking part, but at least the eating part. So you say you're in the fire service, and I know that food is a passion of yours. Where did your interest in food and cooking, where did that come from?
I'm sure for a lot of the folks that are listening to this, it's been a long journey. Food doesn't typically just bite you from the get-go, and you'll have to apologize. I'll apologize ahead of time. My food puns are terrible. I never get full of them. But both my parents, I just did another one there, didn't even know it. Both my parents worked full-time. My mom was a teacher. My dad was in aerospace. But my mom, bless her heart, she tried her best. But the food wasn't always exceptional. And it wasn't until I really got exposed to my aunt, who was an exceptional home cook. But I only got to experience that on the holidays. And when my wife and I got married, we were both young in our cooking journeys. I really had to learn a lot from my own, and I was really exposed to that the most within the fire service. And I had a lot of veterans asking when I was starting to cook. It was intimidating what to cook, how much to spend, what type of food. These are the questions I was often asking myself. And when I was coming up through the fire service, it was at the height of the Food Network, Top Chef, and the age of the celebrity chef. So I soaked up everything I could to try and keep up with those veterans that were teaching me the skills within the kitchen when I first started. I could capture it on TV, YouTube, magazines, cookbooks, anything I can get my hands on. I'm pretty obsessive when it comes to something I'm passionate about. So I cooked for years as a firefighter, both starting out in Riverside and then when I joined here in Cobb. And thankfully, I had a little bit of a passion for it. People can sense it because I was chasing after trying to master a recipe, much like you would try to master forcing a door or pulling a hose line. So those members that were around me within my crew saw my earnest desire to try and elevate the food, and they were, of course, reaping the rewards. And what I found very quickly, Travis, is that when you cook and put good food on the Firehouse table, then seems to lower down the stress levels of people. They don't have to concern themselves about what was going to be put on the table, if it was going to be fresh, if it was going to be healthy. And having that responsibility, even at the lowliest rank as a probationary firefighter, all the way up until I still cook as a chief, that is a special skill and a special responsibility that I didn't take lightly. So it was always my will and my desire to try and train myself as best as I could. And then that kind of turned into me trying to teach others because they saw how not only successful my steps were in the process of cooking and preparing food and shopping and planning ahead, but they saw how, hey, you know what, when you actually put food down that was good on the table, you enjoyed levels of quiet and calm. And that's where conversations would start. So when I was consistently being asked by people both within my crew, but then outside of my station, and then soon it was outside of my fire department, I was getting questions from people. I figured, hey, you know what? I've got a camera. I've got a computer. Let's go ahead and start just filming stuff, putting it on the internet to making it easy because I can't remember all the recipes I put out there. So it's just easy for me to write it down or even better to visually see it because I know a lot of us in the fire service are visual learners. So I just started putting my stuff on YouTube. It led to a channel. It led to cooking competitions. And then roughly about a decade ago, I actually landed on a primetime NBC cooking show. So I just thoroughly enjoyed representing the fire service within that realm. I would say pushing my experiences onto the internet so others can share and learn from it because the best way to learn is to fail. And man, if you don't fail in the kitchen, you're not trying. That journey just led me towards where I was in a position to start talking about food on a national level across the nation to any fire service that would listen to me. So the journey's paid off very well for me.
So it sounds like from the passion that is very evident in your voice and what you're saying about food, would you say that cooking is probably one of the most important skills that a firefighter can have or can learn even early in his career?
This is something I've pondered a lot because there are a tremendous amount of skills. We're jacks of all trade. We have to learn a little bit of everything. But the one skill that I think that translates not only within the fire service, but at home, it translates during the career and then post-career is that of providing food and sustenance for not only yourself, but for the members around you. I had a good veteran firefighter when I started out in Cal Fire on Riverside who pulled me aside and said, hey, he was going to teach me the most important skill as a firefighter. I half expected him to take me to the bay and demo forcing a door or throwing a 28-foot extension ladder. Instead, he took me straight to the grill outside and said, I'm going to teach you how to cook lemon and pepper chicken. I'm thinking to myself, what is he talking about here? But that really kicked off my journey within the Firehouse. For any cook, for any that can cook, they understand the power it has to be able to connect, to break down barriers, to refuel, to entertain. It translates to everyone, no matter your background or purpose. We all need to eat. We can all share in the experience, and it is the one universal language that we can all pretty much understand. The Firehouse Kitchen really is the most reverential healing tool in the fire service, and we try and wield it to its potential. So take advantage of the experiences and the skills you earn in the kitchen, and then put them to good use off duty as well. Whether you're a single fire recruit learning to feed yourself nutritional meals, maybe on a dime, or a spouse looking to impress your special someone on a day, Valentine's Day, holidays, you name it, or maybe the eldest sibling looking to host your first holiday feast, this skill will last you a lifetime.
So when you start talking about the skills of being able to cook and, cook for yourself, I know that firefighters typically have control of 2 out of 3 days, depending how your shift is. You can cook for yourself at home. You can pick what you eat at home. But if you're the one that cooks at home and you also cook at the station, how hard is it to translate making spaghetti for, say, 4 versus making spaghetti for 8 or 10 or whatever the case is?
It's a great question, Travis. It's all about scaling and understanding your ingredients. And I think the best skill to try and, when you're looking to cook for maybe 6 to 12 firefighters, there's really 3 skills that I try and hone in on that I can teach to the people out there that are listening. And that is to plan ahead, to meal prep, and to buy in bulk. Planning ahead hopefully is self-evident. You schedule out the coming shifts. Even if you're like the single lone cook at a firehouse, perhaps you can try and encourage other people. Hey man, can you just cook maybe once a month, twice a month, maybe help break this out, or maybe jump in here and be a sous chef for me. But really what it does, it also allows you to hunt for sales and seasonal items, which if they're in season, they're more abundant, thus they're more inexpensive. I'm a huge fan of meal prepping. That's pretty much what I do now all day, 20 years into the job. This is how I best take advantage of the quieter moments of the day. So you can prep early and cook, or so like with the tones drop, then you're not taken off track. Time is one of your best ingredients, because if you start early and prep and cook in advance, slow cooked meals, something you put in the oven and forget about for a number of hours, those are the kind of meals that can kind of help out with meal prepping. And then you can always meal prep off shift, which I did for many years. If you're already prepping for you and your spouse and your family, doubling it and then just bringing it into the firehouse, especially if you're a single station, it works out perfectly. And then the last thing I would really condone is buying in bulk. Pool monies and buy in bulk from large format warehouses. Here in the South, we have the likes of Costco and Sam's Club. Mm-hmm. This extends your buying power even in the face of runaway inflation, which we're all dealing with. And then you can always incorporate that with the planning ahead. And don't get me wrong, it's not easy. It's like pushing spaghetti from the back end, trying to cook for that many people. It can be a challenge, but it's nothing you can't overcome by planning ahead.
Yeah, and planning, I think, is even at my house on a personal level, like when my wife is putting the grocery list together, you'd be amazed that she's, hey, there's a special on chicken. What are some ways that we can utilize chicken that we maybe haven't done before, things like that. So there's always an opportunity for diversity in the food that you're eating. But how do you handle it when you've got that one guy at the station who is keto, who's carnivore, who is name the diet of the week? He doesn't eat what everybody else does. How do you handle that when you've got a large variety of preferences and needs when it comes to food?
Man, I'll top you with one of that, Travis. I had a gentleman for many years that actually was allergic to onions. Can you imagine cooking without onions? It was ridiculously difficult, but it really pushes you to, I would say, challenge you and how you can tackle flavor and texture in different ways. And I try and break down food and the fundamentals of cooking into 4 different things. And I'm not the one who came up with this. Samin Nosrat, she's a famous New York Times chef. She's done a great job on Netflix putting out a great video series on salt, fat, acid, and heat. She's got a book of the same name. But it really aids you with inspiration, conceptualization, and execution of successful meals. I take salt as the most effective and abundant seasoning as an example. Salting, let's say, chicken, like you said earlier. If you salt it often and early enough, it affords you, our members, grace with overcooking on a call, just because you're planning ahead with salt and taking advantage of the osmosis and the diffusion skills that it has. I think a great way to sum it up is let's take a small science-based detour on the ability of salt to combat, say, denaturing. Think of our protein as a strand of loose coil with water molecules bound on the outside surface. When an unseasoned protein is heated, it denatures. The coil kind of unravels, releasing all these water molecules out of the protein matrix, leaving the meat dry and tough if overcooked. But by distributing through the protein structure, salt prevents the coil from, I would say, densely coagulating or clumping when heated. When steak, when you see it, it's nice and flat in the pan, but then it starts to seize up like a fist. This is less prone to happen if you have salt in there because it retains the water molecules and it keeps them bound. A piece of meat remains moist and gives you like a greater margin of error and grace. So the same chemical process it's also called brining. You can either do it dry, but just sprinkling some salt on top, or you can put it into a salt and sugar solution submerged in a bath. And again, that's the circling back to time is your best friend and letting it do all this passive cooking. But to come back full circle to your question on, you have people with these various different diets, the ketos and the Mediterranean diets of the world, you almost always find some sort of connective thread. You'll find that, hey, you know what? Everybody can eat sweet potatoes. Great. There's something I can build upon. Everybody, by and large, likes to enjoy protein. Okay, that's 2 out of the 3 things that I'm trying to chase for. Let's make sure we get a high fiber ingredient in there as well, because fiber is very big, helps avoid those glucose spikes and whatnot. So just conversations around the Firehouse that are the routine every single day, just trying to find those gaps that you can fill in with smart, inspirational food ideas through the fundamentals of cooking will oftentimes find you there.
Cool. And that's good to know that all hope is not lost when you have that picky eater among you. But we had Dr. Jill Joyce on a while back, and she was talking.
She's great, by the way.
Oh, yes. Very sharp when it comes to the more scientific end of it. You just covered a lot of science right there, talking about the use of salt and things like that. But something less scientific she said that was interesting was around the Firehouse, if you take the snacks away, if you take and get it, and I'm not saying take them away, but get them off the counter. Clear the countertop, put your fruit out, put apples or whatever the case is. Have you found that it's easier to provide healthy food to the guys on shift if you hide the stuff that's not great for you?
When she spoke, and I listened to her podcast, it was great. She really identified one of the key things that I always tried to employ while I was there. And I actually almost became a little draconish about it, where I would take items that were on the kitchen countertop. And I was bad in the early days, and I apologize to my crews way back then. I would just throw stuff away without question. Now I'm to the point, hey, you know what? If you want it, I'm going to put it just out of reach. So there's effort involved into it if you want to get it, and then replace whatever snacks, or we always had the grocery store drop off those just expired items. Hey, the fire service, they'll eat anything. Here you guys go. And then you have all these pastries and donuts sitting on the countertop. It's hard for people, especially in our, I would say, all the exposures that we're having to deal with, sleep deprivation, chief among them, that when you're trying to look for those quick carbs to try and bring your energy back up, Jill knocked it out of the park. It's exactly what I was said. Take those items, hide them, push them away just out of sight, just so there's effort involved, and replace those grazing opportunities with something that's natural and provides fiber. So you're talking bananas, apples, oranges, grapes. Just leave those on the countertop. And I think the study that she was referring to, she found that people would lose up to 20% of the calorie intake per day just by deploying a very simple habit forming that, great way to handle it.
Yep. And, for me, myself personally, when I had my last physical, things weren't great. I needed to cut back on, lose weight, cut back on sugar, cut back on cholesterol, all the stuff they tell firefighters all the time. And the thing that I started doing was I stopped drinking soda. I tried to
look at you. Good.
try to pick things that were better options. For me, it's sparkling water. I'm sure there's something in it that'll kill me, but it seems to help take the edge off, and it's, throttled that back to where I don't do it as much. And it's just one of those things of make the healthier option available. So, when you cook in the Firehouse, it sounds like that you're also watching out for the health and well-being of the guys on a certain level when it comes to, what you make available. But when you're cooking in the Firehouse, everybody always has the conception, if they're not in the fire service, they eat chili all the time. It's steak all the time. That's pretty true. But when you cook, what do you find to be the most popular options that are traditional that you see in the fire service that are great options and maybe easy for maybe a new cook that is listening to the podcast that they might be able to think about? You don't have to tell us how to cook it, but maybe some things that maybe they should consider looking at as good, safe, healthy, traditional options.
The fire service is very traditional when it comes to its food options. I think we've expanded over the last couple of decades for sure. I know that my most popular recipe by far is just a shepherd's pie or cottage pie. Very homey meal. It can be, typically it's done with veal, but I've offered it many times with ground turkey. And then you can replace their standard potatoes with sweet potatoes or parsnips or carrots if you want to. So there are ways to even take traditional Firehouse legacy recipes and just introduce more healthy options. So just try and staying away from the processed foods, the center aisle of the grocery store, and shopping on the outside circle. That's the best way to handle it. But truly, I think for us in the fire service, because of our demands, both in calorie and trying to stay awake the majority of the time, I really try and focus on just providing my members a large amount of protein. Especially the older you get up in age, that protein threshold seems to get a little bit higher and higher. So I know that, I'm trying to remember that off the top of my head, Dr. Peter Attia and Dr. Andrew Huberman, two names I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with. They always are trying to advocate for at least 1 gram protein per pound of your ideal weight for everybody. And that's when I'm cooking for people, I look around the room and I'm trying to shoot for that. So 150, 200, maybe 225, but you need to start slowing down in the eating. So those are the types of things I'm trying to shoot for, is make sure I have a baseline protein capture for everybody within the table that I'm serving. Try and make sure I'm getting fiber into them through some nice green proteins, or not proteins, but produce. And then you can build the recipe in and around there. At this point now, with our fire service being so diverse, I think the food's starting to reflect that as well. So you're not going to traditionally find the same recipe done 5 or 6 times out of a 10-month cycle. Things are going to be changing up consistently, and people are, quite frankly, they're just open for it. I think the advent of social media has really pushed, hey man, let's try something completely out of the box here and see if we like it. Mm-hmm. I took a lot of recipes from Southern California and brought them over to, Atlanta, Georgia. And initially there was a lot of pushback, but those are my most requested meals to this day. A lot of Latin inspired foods, a lot of Vietnamese food. So just find inspiration from the people that you're servicing as a cook, and then just build around there, and you'll start to unlock, I would say, people's journey and their reluctance that was once there to try new foods. It'll disappear.
Yeah, and ask what was your mom's best recipe? Not your. I'm sure you got one, but if you got that guy on your shift that's maybe not from where you're at, hey, what did your mom like to cook? Oh, she did roasted chicken. Okay, let's try it.
Yeah.
And just mix it up and get input from other people. Always, when my wife, she prepares something that was traditional when she was a kid, it's very different than what I did. And it's nice when we try different things and you get a pretty big repertoire doing that. But one of the things that you did mention in our conversations outside before we were recording, you were talking about the 80-20 rule, which that seems like that's got a lot of application when it comes to feeding the Firehouse. Why don't you explain what the 80-20 rule is and how that applies to what we're talking about today?
Yeah, this is something, Travis, I came up with a couple of years ago, and I've stuck to it. I would say drives a lot of what I do lifestyle-wise. But not only is 80-20 a great rule of thumb for the protein-to-fat ratio for a great burger, but it also works well for behavioral guidelines for health. I try and stick to at least 80% of the time staying disciplined, making an informed decision on healthy foods, and earning energy through movement, whatever the movement may be. I try and get in an hour to an hour and a half every single day. But the other 20% of the time, you have to remember to live. Food is a pleasurable journey. It's a pleasurable experience. You've got all sorts of textures, temperatures, colors, flavors, and there's a reason why this is a universal language. So please, you have to remember, even if you're sticking to a diet that may or may not be successful for you, that you have to live. You have to give yourself some grace and allow an opportunity for you to enjoy those people around you. And then once you develop a program or a protocol that outlines healthy decision-making, this mantra becomes second nature after committing time. Start slow, win small victories. Consider shortening your window of eating, let's say from maybe 10 hours to 8 hours to combat possible insulin resistance and flight inflammation. Shop on the outside of the circle, grocery store like we talked about earlier, and focusing on produce and protein sources. Dedicate time and energy towards optimizing sleep, so that you can avoid those late evening snack urges. Small steps with easy victories, and then scale up. I usually operate in the 90-10 range now instead of 80-20 because I've been doing this for a decade plus. And then take full advantage of the 10% without restrictions. It's a liberating feeling. My wife and I typically at least once a week, maybe twice a month, we'll go and get ourselves some pastries from a beautiful pastry shop in Atlanta. And I can go with no reservations because I've stuck to the mantra of the 80-20. And again, just remember to live. Life is precious. Nobody knows that better than you and I and those brothers and sisters in the fire service. You have to take advantage of it.
Yep. And exclusion of, I'm not going to eat this because it's bad. I'm not going to eat Oreos because, yes, they're not great for you. But if you totally exclude them, what are you going to want? You're going to want Oreos. And Jeff Ash, who is a health and wellness coach that I've been working with personally out of Texas, he's very much on honor your hunger. If you're hungry for a reason, fuel your body, but fuel it properly, fuel it at the right time, and try to respect it by not eating the garbage and make healthier choices as much as you can. So let's see, we've talked about the 80-20 rule. We've talked about scaling up and things like that. But let's say you have that firefighter who has the desire to be the next Gordon Ramsay of the Firehouse or whoever your celebrity chef is. What would you say are the top, I know you talked about skills of purchasing and things like that, but if an individual wants to sharpen their game up in the kitchen, what would you say are the top 3 skills and or gizmos they need to make cooking at the firehouse a lot easier and probably more satisfying?
I hate to go rudimentary, base level, low-hanging fruit here, but your number one thing is just your skills with a knife. There have been more fingers that have been punctured, hands that have been sliced in the fire service than I care to remember. I'm just seeing people cut sometimes on a cutting board makes me cringe. And it's just as simple stuff as, you know what, it's the claw method. Just use the bases of your finger as just a guard for the side of the blade as you're cutting it. There's plenty of great videos on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram that will teach you that. But number one, knife skills. Yeah, make sure it's a sharp knife. But as far as tools within the kitchen, I know that there are many people out there that are ashamed to use a thermometer, but use the tools that are available to you. It's like having a hydrant assist valve and leaving it on your engine and not plugging it up to the hydrant. Use it because it's always an option for you. Mm-hmm. There are great ways through process and trial and sets and reps. You'll figure out smells and feel about what temperature will be specifically for protein. I've gotten fairly good at it now, but if it's for a large crowd of, let's say, 12 guys, and I've got 12 rib roasts or ribeye steaks, I'm not going to take that chance. I'm going to insert a probe and do a reverse sear nice and slow in the oven, and I'm going to wait till it hits that target temperature of about 118. I'm going to take them out and flash them on the pan for maybe 30 seconds on both sides, and then it should finish around 125. Why? Because I used a thermometer. So please, by all means, feel free to use, and then you have to invest. Make sure you get yourself a good one. So knife skills, a thermometer, and I have to tell you, man, you just have to have the requisite, I would say, grit, because you're going to fail. You're going to have those times where you've cooked chicken for everybody, but somebody happens to get that one where it's just a little raw inside. That's what the microwave's for. So just remember, you're going to fail. You're going to have people ride you hard, especially in the fire service. But man, underneath the skin, they are so thankful that you put the time and effort in there to cook them a good meal. So just stick with it. Stick with it.
Yep, I agree with that. One of my hobbies is I enjoy barbecuing. Or when I say barbecuing, I don't mean in the backyard for our friends listening in other places. But if you're from the South, you know what barbecuing is. That's where it's wood, it's slow. Yeah. And it took me a long time to learn how to not over-salt it, how to not cook it dry. It takes time to learn those things. And I like to refer to it as experimental barbecue when I'm doing something new. Hey, it might be great. It might be terrible. No promises. But if it turns out pretty good, we'll do it again.
So let me ask you, Travis, this quick side gent there. What is your favorite style of barbecue?
Do you have an idea that you can't quite get out of your head and onto paper? Does your department need updated shirts? If so, you need to talk to the guys over at Studio Print Shop. We've been working with the guys at Studio on making some of our ideas become reality. Whether you need screen printing, embroidery, or graphic design, they have you covered. They're even working with the latest direct-to-garment printing technology to make your ideas come true. Check out their link on our website or go to studioprintshop.com and get 10% off your first order when you use the discount code ALLCLEAR. Studio Print Shop, creativity fueled by passion and vision. Oh boy, I know some people are going to want me to say Eastern, some are going to want me to say Lexington, but to be frank and honest, I haven't met a whole lot of barbecue that I don't like other than that weird South Carolina mustard stuff. No offense to our listeners in South Carolina. It just don't work for me, but a lot of it depends on how it's cooked, particularly with pulled pork. That's like gospel here. I can tell a lot about a person's abilities just by tasting their pulled pork. And there's not any that I don't like. I've been to Lexington barbecue up in Lexington, and it's really good. I've had Eastern before when I've been to fire events down around Wilmington. They have really good barbecue down there, and I don't have a favorite. I know that sounds really weird, but I'm also a big brisket fan too from Texas.
Ooh, now you're talking my language. My wife and I actually, we're about to head out, towards the end of May. We're going to go to Central Texas and do a barbecue crawl.
Really?
We're going to hit all the big places, Franklin, Terry Black's, KG's. Then now you're talking brisket in Central Texas. It's a home run for me.
So let me throw one out to you. If you're going to be in Dallas, there's a place called the Pecan Lodge. Go check it.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yeah, the thing with the Pecan Lodge, be there early because they close when they run out of meat. That's, yeah. So, yeah, barbecue I get passionate about, making me hungry. But since I have a cooking expert here in front of me, you've touched on this, I'm going to indulge my own culinary interest here. What's the best way to cook a steak? And I know a lot of our firefighters are going to want to know that.
I gave it away, especially when you're cooking for in bulk. Typically, even a single station, you've got a minimum 3 people, probably 4 to 5. Though I am actually currently at I would say a triple station, so we've got at least 12 people there. It's just so easy to start in the oven and just bring it up to temperature nice and slow. If you have a water bath, that is primarily the best way to do it. And there are fire stations out there that actually do have water, like a circulating water bath. Right. And then just keep it up. And trust me, we've done it at many a fire station. They're very inexpensive now. All you need is just a plastic tub, water, and a circulator. And it could be as cheap as $60-$70 these days. So it's not a backbreaker. But yeah, you bring it up to close to the temperature that you know that you want it to be. For me, it's typically medium rare. So like I said, around 117, 118, you take it off there. It's at that temperature. It's perfectly cooked all the way through tip to tail. And then you just get something smoking hot, like a nice piece of cast iron skillet, and you throw it on there 500 degrees, both sides. Get that nice Maillard reaction that you want, creation of the nice caramelization on the crust as well. And you just can't defeat it. It's hard to beat.
Yeah, that sounds like a winner. Okay, now my next one, then this is a big one that me and my family have been going through recently. So I've always enjoyed a good cheeseburger. I don't care how you turn it, they're good. But I started getting turned on to smash burgers. I think
there you go.
That's a Cali thing.
I think you and I just became best friends.
So there's a guy on YouTube, and I really want to try to get him one day on here just to talk about smash burgers. I know that's very self-serving, but it's called Ballistic Burgers. He replicates famous cheeseburgers from around the country, from different restaurants and places like that. And it really amazes me how many of them are that smashed style. But so smash burger versus grilled cheeseburger, which is easier, which is better?
Smash burger is my language. In fact, my wife, for this last Super Bowl, she said, I want you to make my favorite thing that you make right now, and that's a smash burger. And they're very easy to do, because with a good burger, the less is more. So you don't want to handle it very much. You can pretty much take it out of wherever you collected it from the deli, and maybe they grind it up there for you. Maybe you're a nerd like me and you grind it up yourself in a food processor. And you basically hold it like a brand new baby, and you gently throw it onto the skillet. You might put it very softly into a nice ball and then salt it. And then right there, you literally just smash it on a plancha. And you keep it there. It sounds like this Ballistic Burger, he's my kind of dude. Throw some onions on there after you've cut them nice and slim on a mandolin. You soak them in an ice bath for about 5 minutes so they stay crisp, but they can also cook and caramelize. So you'll have a little bit of texture still on there. You
Mm-hmm.
throw the burger on there, you smash it, put the onions on top, you cover it up for a little bit. Then you throw the cheese on top and you allow it to steam right there. And then you get your buns set up on the side on the plancha, get a nice little sear on them. You put on some sauce if you want to. You don't really need to at that point. And then you flip it on top of the buns and it is good to go.
Brother, you better be careful. I'm headed toward Atlanta.
Come on.
But so, I mean, I know those are two self-serving topics, but I think comfort food is something that we all enjoy. And whether it be a steak, a cheeseburger, chicken pot pie, whatever it is, it's important that, like you mentioned, that we take time to enjoy the food that we eat. And it's so easy to, I've got to lose 10 pounds. I need to lose 20 pounds. I've got my physical assessment coming up. Whenever we start thinking in that realm, it can really shut us out to enjoying that. And life's way too short not to enjoy a cheeseburger every now and then. And if you're vegetarian, I'm sorry you're missing out on something really good, but I'm sure you've got something that'll work. A funny story, a friend of mine, he's at one of our stations here in Concord, and he cooked vegetarian lasagna one night, and he didn't tell the guys that it was vegetarian lasagna. And I
can imagine how that turned out.
Oh, they loved it. They were tearing it up. And then he told me, hey, by the way, there was no meat in that. And then they wound up liking it so much. It's one of the most requested things for him to do. So it's amazing how inspiration comes out of things we don't always expect.
And that's usually built upon the cachet of a good home cook who's earned the trust of the people that are eating his food or her food. As long as you're willing to go out there and hear the inspiration from other people that you were cooking for, then the Pandora's box opens at that point. You can cook with anything and they'll be open to at least trying it once. And that's all you can ask for as a Firehouse cook.
Yep. I agree. What do you not eat? What's your least favorite food? I know I've got to ask that question of the world famous chef too.
I'll be honest with you. There's nothing I won't eat. I'll cook anything. I will eat anything. I'm at that stage now in my 40s. I'm trying to avoid sugar at all costs, except during that 20% like we talked about, and then I'm diving all in. But by and large, I've tried to eliminate sugar from my diet entirely, but there's nothing I will not eat. I'll eat anything underneath the sun.
Okay, that encourages us to try new things. Before we wrap it up today, what are some good resources? I know you've got some recipes and things out yourself, and we'll talk about your endeavors here in a second, but what are some other good resources that you can refer folks to, whether it be for cooking at home, cooking at the station, cooking wherever? What are some good resources that you could turn us on to?
Great question, Travis. Inspiration for most of us home cooks is typically the biggest challenge because there's so much information out there now. And then being able to rely on somebody that you trust to make, I would say, consistent and reliable recipes is another challenge. But I found over the last decade plus that America's Test Kitchen is by far and away the best teacher of fundamental skills. And I would say the recipes are very well for scaling up for the fire service. So I would very much behoove your crowd of people that are listening to this to invest some time into America's Test Kitchen. New York Times is another great resource. And then heck, just go onto YouTube and type in anything and everything that you can imagine to try and cook, and just use those filters through the America's Test Kitchen, New York Times. There's a couple of other people out there, but I want to spoil it for everybody. But those two are my primary resources that I use almost on a daily basis, just to try and help screen out the noise and trying to find a recipe that will be successful so that you're not wasting our valuable money, like I said, with the runaway inflation. That our money is very important to us. We want to spend it wisely. So trust those institutions that have led a lot of home cooks very successful journeys and careers for many years.
Okay, cool. So America's Test Kitchen, ATK as my wife calls it, and
Perfect.
Also New York Times. So that's good information. But if people want to look up Ryan McKay and all of his wonderful endeavors in food, where can they find your info at?
I'm semi-retired when it comes to cooking. I'll come out of retirement every once in a while and cook something for my lads, but the best way to reach me is probably via Instagram. It's just at the Firehouse Chef. It's the same with my email, the firehousechef@gmail.com. You can find me, Ryan McKay, on LinkedIn. And I do have a website where you'll find probably about 50 or so recipes at thefirehousechef.com. I'm happy to take questions. I still get questions from people across the nation even today. So fire them away. I'm happy to answer them for you. And then come on, let's talk food.
Excellent. We'll put those notes in our show notes and on our website, allclearpodcast.com. Before we leave, Ryan, I do have a question for you, though.
Oh, boy, I'm so excited right now.
I know what's getting ready to come. Do you know how many tickles it takes to make an octopus laugh?
Tentacles.
There you go. Oh, okay. I think that's the
yes,
first time. So yes, and yeah, octopus is something I don't think I'll eat either. That's a little weird for me, but
Oh, it's delicious. It's delicious.
I'll take
Don't deprive yourself.
I'll take your word for it. I'll take your word for it. All right, very good, Ryan McKay. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. And also, I know that was a very bad joke. I encourage you to go to allclearpodcast.com. There's a little microphone down in the bottom. Click that microphone. Leave us a joke. If it's a good joke, a clean joke, you might have kids listening, we'll put it on the air and let y'all enjoy it. But in the meantime, as we always say, light your fire within. You have been listening to All Clear. All Clear is presented by the North Carolina Firefighter Cancer Alliance and the First Responders Peer Support Network. You can find out more about us at allclearpodcast.com. Leave us a message. We'd appreciate hearing from you. If you like what you hear, tell someone. Opinions expressed by guests do not always reflect the opinions of the podcast. Intro and outro music provided by Wayne John Bradley. And as always, light your fire within. See you soon.